Well, good day, folks. I'm back for part three of my series on The Secret Treasure Hunt by Byron Price. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the information on the contents page and then the first two chapters in the book where we talk about the tale simply told and the passage to the new world. And so I'm going to take up those sections of the book at this time. I did kind of gloss over the welcome, we've been expecting you page, and it's the only real information that I think that you're given there is that why did they look at the Mater Demon? The Mater Demon, the first person who is shown in the book. And it shows the Mater Demon behind bars, if you will, behind a lattice of window bars. And if you couple that with the first part of the book where it talks about the dedication being these people that were imprisoned, it's interesting that that was the book designer put that particular image on the inside first page. Is that basically to tell you that you might get caught looking for one of these in a park somewhere, and it can cause you some trouble. So I don't know. It's interesting that the creatures who are really responsible for all the unexplainable things that happen to you. The Mater Demon who makes sure you get the table near the kitchen, and the Screaming Mimi who loves the sound of a baby crying in your ear. You'll have a chance to send your own sightings of fantastic creatures. And I'm bringing that point up because if you go back and look at National Lampoon magazine, National Lampoon magazine was always trying to put you up to sending in pictures to their magazine, either in the back of the magazine where they would give you a stipend if you'd send in, a picture that was a Finetti. And if you send in a Finetti picture, they'd send you a little bit of money. They were always trying to promote a contest where you might send in something to their magazine. And so it's interesting that you'll get to provide your own sightings, if you will. Here was a contest that the National Lampoon magazine launched. This particular issue was September 1979, and in this particular magazine, they wanted you to send in a nude photograph of your girlfriend with a bucket over her head. But this is the kind of thing that. And then if you look at the TDK ad on the other page, this is what we're talking about in '79, and this is the kind of stereo equipment. People are trying to sell you on stereo equipment. Uh, uh, Alcohol ads were still allowed in magazines, and so anyway, the fact that they added that you could send in your own submissions, I thought was kind of interesting. The next page where it has the secret, it's got the guy or gal, the hippie. You notice how that person on with the fence in front of it with the shovel, uh, has certain elements in the hair, certain elements in the earring. The Andrew Jackson earring is actually featured on the figure. The earring is featured there. So something that you'll see in a later image is actually shown on the earring here on the inside, first two pages of the book. This fence railing, some people have said that there are words spelled out in the fence railing. Uh, some people say that the tops of the fence railing don't actually match. I see a definite L myself in the fence railing at the very beginning. But I can see G's, I can see S's. You can make all kinds of letters out of what's in the fence railing. And then there's the picture of this, these Shakespearean gargoyle features that are on the little fence railing, the banister railing, and then you've got that bear looking figure in the middle. of that. Uh, and so you look at the first image there with the shovel and the stick, and the stick itself has a certain curvature to it, to where the end of it gets skinny in the middle and then it gets wide again at each end. The figure itself is wearing a band around the wrist. Um, so I don't know what visual cues could be taken out of that. Where the knee is, there appears to be a flag on the jeans there. Um, and the nose on the image is also similar to the nose that you'll later see in one of the images that looks like a boot nose or a rocket. Uh, and I don't know if that's setting the stage for how the elements are going to be implemented. Uh, there's a certain fold in the shirt on the image there that you don't know whether that's saying something or not. And then there appears to be writing actually on the back of that the shirt that is being worn, and I don't know if that's an open OPEN or the Queen or what it says, but there's definitely writings even on that Palancar image. So, in the passage to the New World is where we're going to meet the fair people and learn of their immigration. Okay, the Litany of the Jewels is where the reader discovers the nature of the fair people's treasures. Nature. Why do we use the word nature there? Because later on in the poem it says step on nature. Are we talking about a naturalist like James Audubon, perhaps? Uh, why do you put the word nature in there? Why not just say in which the reader discovers uh, the origins of the fair people? I don't know. In which the vanishing is in which the fate of the fair people and their treasures is revealed. So basically, he's used the word witch 3 times now. And then specifically, he's used in which, in which, in which, in which. So every one of the contents is introduced with the 2 words in which, in which. Okay? So what does that mean? Why is the guy just, he can't get away from using the preposition in which for each of these statements? So in which. I just think that's interesting that in every single one of these descriptions, he starts them out with in which. So the treasures are in which the clues to the treasures are given in painting and verse. The clues to the treasures are given in painting and verse. In the field guide to the fair people of the New World, in which the reader meets the descendants of the fair people. Your sightings, in which the readers are invited to submit their own sightings of the fair people. And that, like I said, I mentioned that's something that National Lampoon used to ask you to send in. And then the origins of the fair people. Uh, yeah, 221. I guess no in which there. But then we go to the personae, in which blame is attributed. Well, what are they blamed for? Getting us to go out and look in these parks? So I don't know, in which. This tale simply told a long, long time ago, before the age when man and woman sailed in ships to lands they had never seen. There existed in the old world 2 empires, that of man and that of the fair people. Okay, so before ships sailed, man named his abode civilization, for man was an acquisitive creature and names were things he could possess. He could not fly on wings of a gossamer like a fairy, nor hide in the gentle slope of a mountain like a giant. Okay, so we're going to later be introduced to some giants, right? Um, and we're going to be introduced through some gust of wind, probably. So man often found his strength in words. Okay. I think he's lining out in that paragraph, some of the different things that are going to come in the book, such as gusts of wind, Gone with the Wind, Margaret Mitchell, uh, uh, and I think he's introducing us to some information there. The fair people had no cities or towns or houses. Their home was nature. Here's that word nature again. Uh, and they could play and hide or make themselves unseen to man, who feared nature, for he could not control it. What man could not control, he often sought to change. Thus, over centuries, man built his cities and villages and destroyed basically the fair peoples. Where once lived a goblin, there rose a tavern. Okay, so, are we looking for a tavern? I don't know. Where there once swam in a river maiden, a water wheel spun. Okay, well, a water wheel spun could be any of the Mark Twain references, or it could be a water wheel in Salt Lake City, or a grist mill, or whatever. Forest to lumber, earth to road, man expanded. Excuse me. Uh, from England to Cathay, from Bristol to Bombay, there came a call for the fair people for a new home untrampled by civilization. And they did. So I'm going to read about the fantastic passage. Across North America, 12 treasures are waiting. The key to each requires the proper combination of one treasure painting with one treasure verse. And I say that what that means is you need to take one-to-one relationship. You need only decipher the clues in any pair to learn the location of a treasure cask. In each cask waits a key. Return the key to gain the treasure for you. Okay, so here we go. If you are unable to retrieve the cask but believe you have determined its site, you may acquire its treasure by successfully completing the form in the back of the book with a precise description and explanation of your discovery. Any successful discoveries of a treasure will be described in the next edition of The Secret. Never happened. Never happened. But there was never a second edition that described the find in Chicago. Never, not even in this printing, which happened after the Cleveland solve, have they described any of the solves in the subsequent editions. So Byron kind of doesn't pass the honesty test, when you get to page 8 of the book. When the one in Chicago was found, he did not meet the page 8 requirement where it was said that any subsequent publications of his book, any successful discovery of a treasure will be described in the next edition of The Secret. There has not been any description in any secret book subsequent to the original printing that has met that promise to the secret community. Finally, you will meet many of the modern descendants of the fair people who arrived on America's shores. You are cordially invited to inform us in words or pictures of your own sightings of the fair people as yet unseen for inclusion in the next edition of The Secret. Did nobody send in a submission ever for a subsequent printing of The Secret? I'm sure they received some. I don't know if there was a reprint of The Secret between the time the original book was published and after and before the Chicago one was found, or Cleveland. And so here are two things that the author is telling you they will do as a promise to you for buying your book that has never happened, and apparently never will happen. Okay, so looking at these pages in the background imagery, there appears to be like a cloud formation behind all of this textual information. And at the bottom, we have an Indian dressed in a partial robe, where we assume this to be a Native American, smoking what looks to be a peace pipe. And in the first image, we have a fairy floating with a twig in its arms. And that particular image will appear later in another JJP drawing. The robe somewhat will appear in a future drawing, and I've yet to discover on page 6 what is in the bottom of that. I mean, it almost looks like there's a badger or a beaver or some sort of facial animal that's trying to bite at the covering that's over the figure. The tree itself in the background, I don't know if it appears to be a specific type of tree, if you will. And then there's a tree branch, obviously, in that image that comes down. And so I don't know if the background is supposed to be clouds. I don't know if the background is supposed to be smoke. But this little globe image at the bottom, I think, has a significant amount of detail in it. I guess we have to wait and read some more. But so there's 3 appearances of that first image on 3 subsequent pages. And so I don't, know if it was just repeated for the background. But that image is repeated 3 times, where it shows a native person in that picture. We come to the passage to the New World. And on page 9, the image changes, but the background appears to stay the same. So we're still using this cloud-formed background, a square box in front of it, where we're going to provide some information to the reader in a square box. And where we've converted from the Native American and the fairy, we've now moved to perhaps a Viking on a Viking vessel sailing to the New World. And, in this, you can see, that maybe there's a ladder on the boat. Why would a ladder be on that boat on page 9, hanging off to the side? A ladder, is that a ladder? Is that a ladder? What is that? But it's towards the back of the boat. Looks like a ladder to me. And then the sail itself is probably not exactly the way it might potentially look. There's a smaller person, and then a bigger person in a cape with a hat. That hat has a certain funnel shape to it. And even the head of the Viking boat has a, certain look to it. The northern seas are cold and cruel gray. Across them sail the fair, tall elven folk southward. The seas are blue, serene, and warm. From that soft mist with many a merry a joke. Sweet spirits came from west at close of day, beneath sails brilliant as peacocks fan. And so it goes on to talk about the passage to the New World. And then on page 10, we actually get a glimpse of where all of the different immigrants came from to the newfound land. And so again, you draw a line from one side over to the other. So in the image on page 10, you have this little pot-bellied guy, and his nose has a certain shape to it, like it's a fruit or something. So I think there's some information there. The shoulder blade actually, I think, gets repeated in a later image, like for Florida, that bird that's in that particular image. And then at the top, you have, a series of individuals jumping off of a sign. And so I don't know if this is illustrative of somebody jumping off of something, like one of the feature people we're going to see in the back is going to come off the top of something and then tumble to the ground. And then we've got this tail on this I don't know, this animal, this rat, whatever it is, it's on this map. And the guy's climbing up one side and he's got this long tail, this rat tail, if you will, that then captures the foot of the guy with the dunce hat. And so you've got, all of that going on in this image. And then we get to the next page where it says, not so awful long ago as the stars who created time tell it, the fair people withdrew from the old world, which they had called the Middle Kingdom, migrating across the ocean to the hills and forests of the newfound land, all capitalized as in the NFL. And so I'm wondering if later on we're going to find a football player in the book, in one of the later chapters, that's wearing like the number 9, and maybe he's in I don't know, he might be in a Chicago Bears uniform. And then we'll need to figure out who that NFL player is and see how that person might relate to it. Um, the newfound land in reality was discovered by Leif Erikson. So Leif Erikson is actually the person who discovered Newfoundland. And if you go down here at the bottom and you look at the image, so we've now transitioned from this, I don't know, Djinn Rummy looking figure with a dunce hat on page 10. And now to page 11, we've got an image background with a couple of trees. We've got a little lake with a smaller boat on it, and it looks like a little Red Riding Hood figure floating on that. And we've got it looks like the Toronto Ogre is in that little smaller boat there with the paddle. There's definitely an image in the smaller boat with the little, well, it kind of looks like a buffalo. It kind of looks like a buffalo to me, but anyway, with the paddle. And then you've got, I consider this to be Leif Erikson here, this figure with the red nose and the Viking helmet. And if you look at it, there's a whale tail in the shoulder image of that image. So if you take the little dome shape with the cutouts on his shoulder, that looks like an armament, kind of looks like a tank, an armored tank or something on his shoulder, and then below that there's a whale in his elbow. And then we've got that checkerboard pattern on that shirt of that image. And so you've got the checkerboard that we'll see, or the chessboard, and then superimposed in that checkerboard or chess image, there looks to be a square, shape like a house or something, even embedded in that checker part. And then that beard, the beard, maybe that's James Beard, maybe he's got some food in his beard, because later on we're going to be introduced to James Beard in the book. And that's an Argyle pattern. Maybe later that Argyle pattern of that sweater, maybe we'll learn later on that one of these figures in the back of the book is the Duke of Argyle. And here we're talking about, Savinelli had been commissioned by the Queen. Ooh, Savinelli? Who's Savinelli? I bet you there's the Dingle. I bet the Dingle is somebody. We're talking about sealskin. So simultaneously, to hear the kin and the clan call it, years and years before, was Brandon, a leprechaun from Kerry, who zigzagged all over the way that tip of the Dingle of the Brave New World. We're talking about Vasco da Gama and the Portuguese. So the next one, the first to set foot was Ruddy Alf, and Ruddy Alf is going to be Thorvaldsen Eric the Red of Norway. So the first paragraph is Eric the Red. Next, or simultaneously, here his kin and clan tell of it, is Vasco da Gama from Portugal. So the second paragraph is about Vasco da Gama going around the Cape of Good Horn. And then the third, the most of the fair people deemed the exploits of Alf and Brandon to be mere myth, even legends, it seemed. And so then we basically adopted the Folletto out of Genoa as our person, and that is Christopher Columbus. So on page 11, the author's basically describing the discovery of the New World to you in terms of the actual explorers who discovered parts of the country. First being Eric the Red, secondly being Vasco da Gama of Portugal, and then third being the Columbus. There's also another explorer by the name of Bartholomew Diaz that's involved in the discovery of the Americas. And I didn't go on to provide as much information about that. in my analysis here. But that's what you're talking about. So on the next page, you get to the brilliant art, shining beauty, their power and glory, and the flickering and fading and firefly lights against the dawn. The time of man had begun. We're talking about the Spice Island trade at this point, and all of the Spice Island happenings. And as you move on, you start talking more about the Columbus and the Savinelli because he was the Spanish person. So now I'm on page 12 and I'm looking at the image background. Again, this image background is the same. It's this cloud, or is it smoke? What is it in the background that all of this is actually on? Is it a cloud or is it smoke? I don't know. But the background doesn't change until you get to 2/3 down into the image, where you get the first introduction, in my opinion, to the Chicago solve. And you have the roof element here on page 12 towards the uh, left-hand side of the page. You actually have the roof that's then featured later on in the image for Chicago. And so are we trying to couple this particular background image to this fairy here with the wings that's got her hands out? Well, of course we are, because this fairy here that has the arms out is actually a statue that you find there near the Grant Park area. And the blue roof on the building is again in the same Chicago image. So here you have a coupling on this page of an image element that you will need to solve the Chicago puzzle with that of the roof element that you will later need to identify as being part of that puzzle. Well, here's the real question for us. If those two elements are sitting here in this particular diagram, what of it is this on the right-hand side of that image in the background where we have the tree? What is that pointing to? Is it pointing to a different image? Is it pointing to the same image solved? Because there's some details down here in that part of the image as well that I think deserve some sort of analysis in terms of what we can get from that. So then the next page, or on page 13, and again, the top of the image is the same, but we now have introduced a castle structure. And again, we have another roof that's in the shape of that triangle shape as well. And we have two castle type structures. And, you know, in Canada, there's a park that has this tower. And I think that it's instructive to note that there has to be a tower in one of our solve locations that has a big gap and then has a vertical window that runs within the image figures. Because on page 13 you have this castle type design feature, and then below it you have the basically the slit in the tower. And I would suspect that one of these will be found in a location where you have a split like that in a tower structure, because that particular piece gets utilized several different times throughout the book. So, you know, in Dallas, Texas, there's at the park, there's a building that has that tower looking feature in it. You've got some water in this. You've got a guy in the water looking up from the water. You've got what appears to be a sailboat maybe out into the water over here. You have a guy that's a face with like a cat, and then the rest of it's a human face. And then over here you've got another figure, and it looks like the two letters F and F appear there in that rising part on the left hand side of that image at the bottom of the page. And so here we're starting to talk about the English and the fairy queens and the Sherwood Forest. And maybe this reference on the page before is actually just the trees referencing the Sherwood Forest. But so I think this is where you get into looking at how maybe those items fall into your puzzle and where the part is. So when we move to page 14, we're talking about the Clau-Batamanakins. They're made ready their broad-bottomed boats, and away they sailed to settle peacefully at length among rolling hills by a wide river richly lined with cliffs and trees, clear running creeks. They found there the wild cats in abundance, where they named their new home the Catterskills. Now, the Clau-Batamanakins have to be the Hudson River, because the Catskill Mountains, is the area that's being described here, and the discovery of that particular part. George Washington Irving writes a lot about the Catskills and the Catterskills and the Hudson River Valley. And when we get to the back of the book, you're going to find out that the name and the word Hudson will come up a number of times when you look at the etymology of the people that are being referred to in the back of the book. And so I don't know if this eventually leads us to a cask being in and around the Hudson Valley. We all know that Joanne Trilling made her home later on, upwards in upstate New York in that general area. But the other part is that Wildcat Creek, since he changed the name from Catskills to Wildcat Creek, maybe we're just looking at Wildcat Creek and where a Wildcat Creek might exist in a different state, a different place altogether. So from Erie, the most distressful country, the conquered and humbled native gentry, the Cid, set forth to follow Brandon's path. And again, Brandon is, we're looking at the Portuguese or the, Vasco da Gama. No, Brandon's actually the Spanish guy from Genoa. So anyway, we're talking about, Columbus again, and where that guy might be. Okay, so lost to the Scottish Highlands then, and Invermere, there was a fair folk, the Brownings, people of peace, etc. Well, the most relevant reference you can find to the Scottish Highlands is a book by John Campbell called "The Popular Tales of the West Highlands," and this is basically the history of the Irish people and all the different clans that are involved. Clan MacGregor, all the different types of clans that are out there. And so when you start looking at on page 14 of The Secret, these ideas that have to do with the history, you have to kind of look at some of that. So again, the image figure in the background on page 4 is so similar to that of some of the others. But let's look at the bottom of this image, and what can we derive from the bottom of the image? Well, we've got a black guy, it looks like, standing on the side of a cliff, right? And there's a tombstone next to the black guy on the cliff. And we're now talking about people that might be Irish, right? And we now know that there was one of these found in Boston. So if we now know that there was one found in Boston, and you've got a black person standing next to a grave marker on a hill, are we now getting symbols or symbolization here in this image that we need to be looking for a black cemetery? Because that's what the illustration is showing us on the right-hand side. And then the other side of this shows like a boat and with a sail on it. And then we have basically a horse with a tiny ant on it, like somebody might be taking a midnight ride. I don't know. And then there's another guy that looks to be, I don't know, Fidel Castro like with a shoe sticking down. And then later on, we will find in an image figure on a horse with a shoe dangling down on it. And in front of this is a lady figure with her foot dangling down. So I don't know if that has anything to do with later images where we'll see a horse and then with a leg dangling down the side of it. But if you look above that leg, it looks like there's another whale that his from the knee up, that the jeans kind of form a shape, and the hat on that particular figure looks to be similar to a, I don't know, helmet of some sort, maybe. I don't know. So we get to talk about the Nova Scotians and the sky, and it says down ice green fords of Scandinavia and away to the land of the eagle. We then sailed the elk folk. So the land of the eagle, what is the land of the eagle? I think if we find out and figure that out, we might have another location. The Nissen and the Tamtra is what we're looking for here. And then guided on its stately way to the Rhine maidens, a great fleet bearing away strong food dwarfs from the mines. So here we're talking about dwarfs. And remember earlier where I said he used the word witch in a number of times? I told you that we were going to run into the witching again. So let's just look at this. Guided on its stately way by the Rhine maidens, a great fleet bearing away strong food dwarfs from the mines, plump and hairy, witchen from the fields, the handsome Wilden Fraulein from the marshes, and the red-capped Hutchen with the black forest forsook Germany and their neighbors for the New World, far across the sea. So I actually think that this paragraph is saying Wichita and Hutchinson. And I think that the solving locations here are Wichita, Kansas, and Hutchinson, Kansas. And that he is saying that the Rhine maidens brought the people to Wichita and to Hutchinson. And I think that's what the Witchen and the Hutchin are all about in that particular paragraph. Just as I think that the Boston has a lot to do with, and Cleveland has to do with some of these other locations and where they actually landed. So I think what you can get from the actual book is like kobolds. What city would go along with kobolds? Koboldes. And this is Nissen and Elefolk and Tamtra. What state would have Elefork, Nissen, and Koboldals? Because I think this is, and Kelpies and Silkies. That I think is where the information is in terms of getting information from this. As in like the Catterskills, Pixies. Where would you find a Humphrey Bogart? Where would you find the Bogarts? Well, Humphrey Bogarts. Dames, Blanches, and Bertus, the Corrids and the Dundees. That's, I think, what we need to find is where those people actually reside. And from the east, from the far marches, from the wide snowy steppes and boundless fertile plains of Russia, travel the native fair folk, the Vasili, the Poloviki, the Domoviki, and the Vili. The Leshy abandoned the forest tops of Tatary, and Rusalki rose up from the riverbeds. And so I think I don't know what puzzle this one refers to because I'm not familiar with some of these other things. And so, it's hard to, my knowledge of areas is different than other people's, but some of these paragraphs have to hit the specific language. And so at the bottom of this image on page 15, the ear. So the ear is prominently displayed on the image figure that's in charge of the boat, right? And that ear then appears in the Chicago image. So I would say that most of this information, or some of this information on this page, may have to translate to the image for Chicago. And here we have these three guys rowing this boat. And again, there's a triangular shaped structure with a house and a key on that boat, as well as these ears are all these ears on these row people. So if you go back to Chicago, this egg-shaped shield, uh, is there something there that would point you to that landmark or that thing that would say, hey, here, this is where it's at? Maybe that's a Carolyn. Maybe that's a bell tower. Maybe that's what that is. Okay, so moving to page 16, we're talking about the Middle Kingdom, a motley flotilla of Faletti aboard were the Monticello. Well, maybe we're talking about Monticello. I don't know. Linchetti. Maybe we're talking about Lynchburg, the Salvini and the Agline cliff dwellers from the wintry Piedmont. The gay Farelli, so dear to Dante. Well, so Dante is basically that Inferno. So Dante's Inferno, maybe these Samascazo, maybe that's, the Pillar of Hercules. These are all things that we could probably get more information on to come up with where it is that you would find those things. But just in looking at the image at the bottom, you have, 3 or 4 people sitting in this boat. And, again, you've got a lady figure on the stern of the boat there, leading it to a destination. And you've got a guy sitting on it in a rowing position with no oars, and his hair being then charged back by the wind. I think when you get to page 17, you get the picture of a column that you find in the image for Cleveland. You get 2 instances of the column starting on the right-hand side, and then you get the image of a half horse, half man here sitting on a horse. And so perhaps this is the dead giveaway to the Greek cultural gardens. And it says right here in the page 17, it says, and from the Hellas itself, then vanished at last the few surviving centaurs. And there's a picture of a centaur down here at the bottom. Satyrs and nymphs, and scattered remains of the glory that was Greece. Well, okay, so it says up here in the text on page 17 that we're talking about Greece. And it says then we're talking about a centaur. And then at the bottom of the page, they have a centaur, and they have these 2 columns, right, in that image. And then next to that, we have this butterfly that we then find in the Boston image. The wing-shaped design of the butterfly. And then on the far other side, we have the California or Florida palm trees. And so at some point in this verse, you have to move maybe the satyrs and the nymphs. So the nymphs is going to then have to go to the water part, which is the trees, and maybe the satyrs, S-A-T-Y, maybe those need to be that winged butterfly, because we can say that the centaur is directly pointing to the 2 objects on the right-hand side of the page, which have to do with the centaur and the 2 columns. And so maybe the nymphs then have to do with the trees and the water, and the satyrs then have to do with the winged butterfly figure. On the first morning of the first spring day appeared shining in the air slender golden people. Their garments were the richest silk. Well, the silk comes from the butterfly. So that paragraph is going to be transitioning to point to the butterfly, right? With the serpents and flowering vines of silver. Well, we all know that if you look at the silver rush of California occurred in San Francisco. Then, Prince Yi, the wanderer, bearing the great bow with which he had shot dead 9 blazing suns at his side, his golden mother, Hisi Wang Mu. Well, we're now transitioning into some of those thoughts that people, dang it, I went an extra page. Okay, so sorry about that. I turned it to 18 instead of 16. So upon the sleeping surface, Bob, flotilla of Folletti. Oh, I already did that. My bad. I was on the right page. Okay, so anyway, you get to this last page where we're talking about HISA Wang Mu. And if we looked up who that was, and it says beautiful as the moon. Okay, so here we have to be looking at the figures that have all those moons in it. And then you go talk about that you have the Tao Shen, home of the loving imp, is laughing mouse smeared with honey. Well, what has, that's a bee, right? Uh, and then you've got delicate maidens of bright-eyed bearded sages. Well, I've already said that in the back of the book, we're going to find James Beard because that's going to be your bearded sage. In the back of the book, you're going to see an image of the chef James Beard. From impossibly distant Cathay, and Cathay is, Asia. They had traveled, bringing with them to safety to, a wonderful dragon. And so you have to say that in the image that you're talking about, Cathay, and you're talking about the dragon, some would say this is your Chinatown reference. And here in this image, you do in fact have an image of a dragon, and it's in a, I don't know, serpent type shape. So you have to think that this last paragraph is talking about the dragon of China and the Chinese dragon. So what do you get out of all of this? Probably absolutely nothing. But I guess what I'm trying to say that is that I think in the descriptions of all these different people that you have in this section, and where ended, you have information that will get you to the cities and the places. But I think we have to continue on and use the back of the book in order to match them up so we can get the best understanding where each of these would lie. And I then also say that I think some of these names like Folletto and Savante and all of these different brownies, they have reference to actual people in the real world that existed in 1980. And I can't yet identify each one in each of these stories because I think I need to use the back of the book to come up with some more information to help me with that. And so I'm going to break this up and go to the next segment where I will talk about the Litany of the Jewels and how I think, and then, the vanishing, which I don't have the best handle on all of this information yet because I think I need the back of the book to understand some more of it. But you'll find that when you talk about the vanishing in the area here, you're going to get all these different locations given to you. And whether they're red herrings or whether they're real things, I don't know. But hey, Amy Gwen, thanks for coming over. Talking about The Secret, that treasure hunt, that elusive thing that's been going on for years, and hoping to provide some insight into who some of these people are. I honestly did more work on the back of the book than I did on the section that I just went through in the next section, because my goal in this series is actually to expose who some of these images are in the back of the book so that we can maybe better identify or solve locations. So anyway, thanks for coming over and joining in. I'll be back after a bit and talk a little bit more about the vanishing and the Litany of the Jewels